Welcome to this week's edition of the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Neil Stewart and I'm the Editorial Director at the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. Sue McDonald is off having a holiday, probably still recovering from the football yesterday or watching Andy Murray tonight. So we've got competition. I'm joined this evening by two very interesting speakers. Dianne Garland, who will be familiar to some of you. She's a freelance midwife, published expert in waterbirths, and all-round interesting person on these subjects. And with her is Kaveri Mayra, who's a postgraduate research student at Southampton, wide experience of midwifery in India, but also an expert looking at obstetrics violence. This is the week of the last episode of the International Congress of Midwives, and our topic tonight is international trends. But before we start, can I ask Kaveri, first of all, what's your moment of the week? What human thing? We can see the plan for your PhD on the wall behind you, but what's been your moment of the week?
That's not the moment of my week, definitely not. That's what the whole week's been about. But I struggled to choose between two things. One, my sister finally got vaccinated. My family is back in India, and we have had a tough time in finding one of those slots for her. So even though she's like quite older than me, but yeah, so finally I got a news that she got vaccinated. And a competing moment is I tried pole dancing, which was quite amazing. So yeah, I don't know which one is a better moment, but both were quite amazing.
Okay, vaccination and pole dancing. I think that's probably a first. So Dianne, I guess your moment of the week isn't pole dancing. So
no. Definitely too old for pole dancing. Well, you beat me, because I was actually going to say two quicks as well, if I may. First one, I guess, professional. Lots and lots of inquiries now for face-to-face teaching. So people are looking professionally as moving after COVID, which I think is fantastic for all of us to perhaps move away to some degree about Zoom. And then the other one was a personal one. I don't know if anyone's watched the news, but there's been a tremendous heat wave in Canada, and we've got friends in Canada, and I managed to catch up with them. They're quite elderly, and I was very concerned as it was 50 degrees. They live on Vancouver Island, and caught up with them both today. Them and their families are all safe. So one personal, one professional.
Very good. Well, my moment of the week is I managed to speak to one of my sons who has been stranded in America for the entire of the pandemic, but he has to wend his way back this summer, so it'll be the first time that we'll see him in 2 years. So thanks to both our guests, but first of all, let me start off with some comments and the news of the week. I can't come up to Sue McDonald's standards, but first of all, I'd just like to say that a big thanks to everybody at Matflix, Maternity Experts. There was the Maternity and Midwifery Festival. The Northern Festival was held yesterday. And so another 25 presentations are being added to the catalogue that you can all use for your revalidation and for CPD and for catching up, or for research if you're involved in research, or for teaching. So go and check out Matflix. And a big thanks to Sheena Byron and the others at All for Maternity. We've had a joint stand at the ICM this past few weeks, supporting everything that's been going on. And they've introduced us to Kaveri this evening, and I think that's going to be very interesting. So a couple of bits of news just to keep things going along. Bit of headline news, really. The Nursing and Midwifery Council has issued a press release warning nurses and midwives to watch out for fraud callers in case somebody phones up claiming to be from them, asking for your details and asking to make you to make payments either for your registration or for revalidation. And I was just reflecting that, of course, many people who are midwives and nurses probably mentioned that in their social media. Nursing Midwifery Council has also got a new chairman, and his name is Sir David Warren, and he is a former ambassador to Japan. Now, I know later on I will ask Dianne, who's done some work in Japan, if there's anything that Japanese midwives do that's different, since we now have an ex-Japanese ambassador in charge. But I think he's there for his regulation strengths. As I mentioned earlier, today is the final day of the International Confederation of Midwives Congress, I think the 32nd triennial. Both our colleagues later have been speakers at it. But it's been, interestingly, it's been 5 individual days spread across a whole month. And I think a big shout out to Frank Caddy and Sally Permain and all the people at the ICM for a very, very clever way of spreading out the materials so that they're busy schedules. And they did get almost 2,000 people participating. And it's available for, I think, another 2 months for those of you who have to do catch up and on demand. Interestingly, NICE have just announced a whole set of new guidelines on women and pelvic floor health, because last week we had Abigail Holmes doing her piece on how important it was. So that's not bad. From the Maternity Midwifery Hour, 1 week later, NICE agree to follow our lead. Shows that we're getting somewhere. But again, work that people like Jackie Dunkley-Bent and others have been pursuing for some time, and those of you that remember the row about normalizing incontinence and tenor pants, etc. So things, even in the midst of COVID, seem to be moving. So well done to all of them. But it was interesting to watch some bits of the ICM, and we'll come on to some of that in a moment. But the Dr. Thedros, the Director General, was reminding everyone that there's an estimate of 900,000 midwives short in the world for the number of children that are being born, that he believes if we had them, we'd be able to save 80% of the mothers and children who die in childbirth. And the figure he quoted was 4.3 million deaths a year, which, to put in perspective, is higher than the number of people that John Hopkins say have died of COVID, although I don't doubt that the COVID numbers. And it is a reflection that we've had this huge response to COVID, and yet with issues like malaria and mother and child mortality rates, which have been high for years, somehow we've not managed the same level of mobilization. So I think there's some reflection there about that over the coming period as we try and go back to normal. We missed June the 21st. Last week was meant to be Freedom Day in the UK when we all came out of lockdown, but the infection rates appear to be rising, although happily the death rate is not rising so fast. But what that means for us all in the autumn, particularly for those working in healthcare services, as to whether or not we really will be returning to normal, or whether, as some people have predicted, the long tail of this virus is going to carry through into next year and still going to be affecting the way people work. So a moment just to think of the people who've been badly affected, and by all our colleagues who over the months have lost their lives from this infection, those people who went up to the front line. Happily, the rate of death is going down, but it still remains very dangerous. And we're still discovering the impacts of long COVID. And so I think we're going to be living with this, as they have predicted, for quite some time. So let's move on to our subject for tonight. As I said, we were expecting that we would be able to turn our eyes to the rest of the world after lockdown finished. That bit of planning sort of fell off, but nonetheless, we want to have a look at some of the international trends. Because, as I said, the International Confederation they've been meeting in Bali, but it's quite obvious that they're all still in their own front rooms. But it's been very successful. But the themes and the presentations have allowed us to turn our eyes away from our own problems and remember the scale of the challenges and the disruptions that midwives and maternity workers have experienced all around the world. And in the ways in which we have seen in the United Kingdom, some of the advances, whether it's in home births, water births, midwifery-led care, some things can be reversed very quickly in the face of a pandemic, even when many people would say that those courses of action were not justified. So it's a reminder of how fragile some of the progress that midwifery has made over the past decade could well be. So I'm very pleased to be joined by Dianne Garland. Hello, Dianne.
Hi.
Who is a freelance midwife, but she's published. She's an expert on waterbirth. She's an inspector, if you're called an inspector for the CQC. But
we're SPA, specialist advisors. Special advisors.
I bet when you come in, it looks like inspectors. And I bet it feels like inspectors. But she has a very, very wide range of experience. And she's going to reflect on some of the things that she has seen and heard from the International Confederation of Midwives and some of her own comments, and just broaden our perspective out a bit tonight. So Dianne, the screen is yours.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.